All the questions that we did before had just started with an x squared, right? All the questions today are going to have a number in front of the x squared. So I just want to remind you, in general, when you're trying to factor, you want to find two numbers if you multiply a times c, and I'm talking about like ax squared plus bx plus c. So I'm going to multiply the first and the last. All the questions that we were doing before the break were 1 times the c value because our a value is 1. So we're going to do multiply first and last term, the coefficients, and we're going to add to get the number in the middle, which is the b value in your ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, I'm going to show you this method. If you have a different method that you like for factoring these, like some people do factor by grouping or they do guess and check, but this very method is the easiest way I have ever seen to factor, so I'm going to go through this with you. If there's a different method you want to use, though, that's completely fine with me. You just use whatever works better for you because different teachers teach this differently. But I want to show you this method at least because I think this is a really good way to tackle factoring. All right, so I'm going to grab, and this over here to the side is just a description of what I'm going to walk you through right now, but just in case if you want to go back and like look at the process. So I'm going to multiply a times c here. So it's just the first coefficient times the constant. So just 2 times -4. So multiply to get -8. And I'm going to add to get that b value, which is just the number in the middle. So attached to your plain x, -7. Now this is a little tiny bit different than what we were doing before. So when you do the factors here, what I want to have you do, take the very first term, whatever it is, so I've got 2x squared, and I'm just going to drop the squared and put that at the beginning of each of the terms. Okay. Now, can anybody think of two numbers that multiply to give you -8 but add to give you -7? What do you think? Yes, okay, so if I do -8 times 1, that's -8, right? -8 plus 1 is -7. Now, I'm going to fill in the factors with those two numbers. So just make one a -8 and one a +1. Now, should be if I FOIL this back out, right? It gives me the original problem, and you're looking and you're going, wait a minute. So 2x times 2x is not 2x squared, it's 4x squared. So the way this method works, it's just a little trick. So one or both of these is not the real factor. What you want to look for inside your parentheses, if the two terms have anything in common, then we're going to kind of just disappear that out. It's a little trick to the method. So for this first factor I wrote 2x minus 8. So both of these guys are divisible by 2. So that's not the real factor. Now, like I said, this is just a trick to this method. You don't pull a 2 out in front or anything like that. You're literally just going to disappear 2 out of that, basically like reducing it. And so this would become x minus 4 would be the real factor. Just dividing both of those by 2. The other factor I wrote down, the 2x plus 1, those two terms don't have anything in common other than 1. So that is the real factor. And then once you've simplified that, that should be the factored form of that original problem. It's just an extra step from what we were doing last week. And I always spot check these really quickly. We could completely FOIL it out if you wanted to check, but I always at least check the first two. If you multiply those two together, that'll give you the first term. So x times 2x would give me back the 2x squared. And I also check the last two. That should give me the plain number on the end. So -4 times 1 is -4 that you see right there. So that's, I just do a quick spot check with these before I write that as my answer. The middle term should be correct if both of those other terms are. It would be a weird situation if it wasn't. So at least just try to check those two real quick. And this should be the factored form of what we had in standard form when we started the question. Okay, let me try another one with you. And I just put, this is tricky, so I just put several examples on here today. So I'm going to multiply first times last, a times c. So for this question, it'd be 5 times -6, bless you, which is -30. And I got to add to get the number in the middle, which is going to be -13. All right, so while I'm thinking about that for a second, what you want to do, just in your parentheses, just take that very first term, whatever it is, it's 5x squared for this question, drop the squared, and you're going to put that number with the x at the beginning of both of your factors. Okay, now, think about this before you answer me on this, because I know this is tricky. There are only two numbers that will fit the requirement of multiplying to give you negative 30, but adding to give you negative 13. And I just wrote all my possible factors of 30 just to give myself an option. So, to multiply to get a negative number, right, I need one of them to be positive and one of them to be negative. So anytime we're in that situation, if we multiply to get a negative, you're going to have one factor that's a plus and one that's a minus. What combination is going to work for both of those? Dee Dee, what do you think? Yes, okay. And I know, like, immediately, I think I see 30 and I think 10 and 3 with the 13. But if you did, there's no way you could get that to add up to the negative 13. So it's got to be one of these is a minus 15. The other one is a plus 2. Again, you could, just like we were talking about last week, you guys can switch the order these come in. So you could write 5x plus 2 first and 5x minus 15 second. But it should be the minus with the 15 and the positive with the 2. Now, I know if I FOIL this out right now, like 5 times 5 is not going to give me 5, and I know 15 times 2 is not going to give me negative 6. So one or both of these is not the real factor. All you want to do, just look inside the parentheses and see if the terms have anything in common. So 5x and the 15, those are both divisible by 5. So that's not the real factor. The real factor, you don't pull this out in front or anything like that. You're just going to reduce that. Just divide both of those by 5. The real factor would be x minus 3. The other factor I jotted down there, I had 5x plus 2. Those two terms don't have anything in common, so that's going to just be your answer there. And then again, this is my factored form. I just want to spot check real quick. So I do like x times 5x, that would give me back 5x squared, so we're good there. Negative 3 times 2 would give me the negative 6, so we should be okay. If you want to completely FOIL it out, you could do that. It's up to you. So I'm just going to keep going through here. All right, so I'm going to multiply first and last. So 9 times 4 is 36. And add to get the number in the middle, which is 12. All right, while I'm thinking about that, I'm just going to put this in parentheses, and I'm going to start each of my parentheses off. The squared term just dropped the squared from the original problem. So I'm just going to do 9x, 9x. Can you guys think of two numbers when you multiply them, you get 36, you add them, you get 12? Yeah, actually, both of the, it's just a plus 6 and a plus 6. So this is actually a situation where both of the factors are going to be the same. Now, here, 9 times 9 is not going to give me back 9. It's going to give me back 81. So I know that one or both of these, in this case, both of these are not the real factor. Both of these are divisible by 3. So the real factor, I'm just going to divide each term by 3. And this would become 3x plus 2. Same thing, 3x plus 2. And because they are identical, if you guys want to write it as 3x plus 2 squared, you can squish them together and write them together if they're exactly the same, multiplying something by itself. But again, if you wanted to spot check, right, 3x times 3x would give me the 9x squared, and then 2 times 2 would give me the 4 on the end. If you want to completely FOIL, go for it, but hopefully that will be enough to just check. All right, I'm just going to do a couple more, and then I'm going to do a little bit harder ones on the back here with you. All right, so multiply. First and last. All right, so 3 and 7 are going to multiply to give me 21. Add to get the number in the middle, which is negative 22. While I'm thinking about that, I'm just going to draw my little factors in parentheses, and I'm going to start each one of them with a 3x. Just that first term, just drop the squared. Can you guys think of two numbers? You multiply them, they'd give you 21. But if you added them, you'd get negative 22. What do you think? Yes. Okay. Only way to do this, negative 21, negative 1. To multiply to get a positive number and add to get a negative, they both have to be negative. So it's negative 21 and negative 1. So just whichever one, write a minus 21 and a minus 1. Now this is not my answer. I got to check. If anything inside the parentheses has a common factor, that's not the real one. So this is 3x minus 21, not the real factor, because both of those are divisible by 3. So the real factor there would be x minus 7. The other one I wrote down was 3x minus 1. 3x and 1 don't have anything in common, so there's nothing we can remove from that. And again, I just checked real quick. X times 3x, 3x squared. Negative 7 times negative 1 is positive 7 on the end there. Now, we got one more, and then I'm going to do a couple harder ones with you guys on the back. So, multiply first and last. So 6 times negative 3 is negative 18. I'm going to add to get the number in the middle, which is 7. And while we're thinking about that, I'm going to just write my little parentheses. I'm just going to start both of them out with a 6x for this problem. What two numbers can I multiply to get negative 18 that would add and give me 7? What do you think? Yes, ma'am. One's a plus 9 and one is a minus 2. 9 times negative 2 is negative 18. 9 plus a negative 2 or 9 minus 2 is 7. Now, it depends on the question, but you're going to notice neither one of these is the real factor. All right, 6x and 9, both of those terms are divisible by 3. 6x and 2, both of those are divisible by 2. So it kind of depends on the question. It could be one of the factors is not real, or it can be both. It's just going to depend on the problem. The real factor here, if I divide both of those by 3, this would be 2x plus 3. Real factor here, divide both by 2, would be 3x minus 1. And again, just real quick to check, 2x times 3x give you back the 6x squared. Positive 3 times negative 1 would give you the negative 3 on the end. Is anybody having a question? Okay. Now, on the back here, none of these questions, or the factoring that I'm asking you guys to do, the little kind of the trick to do it, it will not work if there's the greatest common factor between all the terms. So before you factor anything, just try to see before you start trying to find factors that multiply and add to give you whatever. Just try to see before you start if all the terms are divisible by something, you got to take that out first. So we haven't had any questions like that on the front side, but on the back we do. So before I start this problem, I should always check this. Do 8, 8, and 70 have anything in common? Like a number they're all divisible by, we think. 2. Okay, now, if we were working with an equation, which we're not here, right? There's no equal sign. I would have you just get rid of the 2. But we are working with just an expression. We're factoring. So whatever we write down should multiply back out to give us this original problem here. So if you do have a greatest common factor, you do have to put that in front of the factors in the little parentheses. Okay, so we're going to take a 2 out in front here first. All right, now this leftover, we'd have 4x squared minus 4x, and then minus 35. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to leave the 2 out in front, and the factored form of what's left over there, so I'm going to have 2 more sets of parentheses, but you do have to leave the 2 out in front. Otherwise it won't give you back the original problem. And I'm going to do just like I did on the front. So I'm just focusing on what I have in the parentheses. So first and last would be 4 times negative 35. Which is negative 140. And I want to add to get the b value, which is just going to be negative 4 there. So I'm just writing it out so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just focusing on what I have in the parentheses. To set this up, I'm going to take that first term, just drop the squared, put that at the beginning of each of the factors. This one's a little tricky. Can you guys think of 2 numbers? I'd multiply them. It'd give me negative 140. A little bit bigger number there. Add it would give me negative 4. Yes, awesome. Okay, negative 14, positive 10, negative 14 plus 10, that's negative 4. So just on one of them, it doesn't matter which one, write a minus 14 and write a plus 10. Now, this is actually a situation. Neither one of these are going to be the real factor here. So 4 and 14, both divisible by 2. 4 and 10, also both divisible by 2. So when I take that out, remember you don't pull it out in front. We have the 2 out in front of this because it was the greatest common factor of all the terms of the original problem. The real factor, if you got the 4x minus 14, is going to be 2x minus 7, if I divide both of those by 2. And the 4x plus 10, the real factor, would be 2x plus 5. Now, if you want to check, just real quick, we got this 2 out in front, so we should be good there. I'm just going to go back up and make sure 2x times 2x would give me the 4x squared that I have there in the parentheses. Negative 7 times 5 is that negative 35. So it would take you just a couple seconds, just check it real quick. This is what they call the completely, if you see completely factored form, a lot of times that's trying to indicate to you that there might be a greatest common factor. All right, I got one more, and you guys all changed this so it was a minus, right? Just otherwise it doesn't, I'm going to rewrite it on my paper here real quick, just minus 24. Now, these numbers are kind of huge. Does anybody know what those 3 terms all have in common? There is a greatest common factor within 3. Okay, so again, if this was an equation, we would just dispose of this, but we don't have an equation, so we got to use it. I'm going to pull a 3 out in front. So left over, I'd have 7x squared minus 26x. Hang on a second. Is that right? Hang on, I'm just checking. Yeah, okay, we're good. Minus 26x and then minus 8. All right, so I'm going to keep the 3 because I have a greatest common factor from all the terms in the original problem. I'm going to start each of these factors with a 7x. All right, I'm going to multiply first and last. So 7 times negative 8 is negative 56. And I got to add to get the number in the middle, which is negative 26. If you ever get tripped up, if you ever like, I don't know, I just start writing out factors of whatever that number is I want to multiply to get. So like 1 and 56, 2 and 28, this would be 4 and 14, and 7 and 8. So those are all the possible options. So sometimes if I get stuck, if I write out my possible options, that'll make it a little bit easier for me to figure out what combination am I going to use to multiply to get negative 56 but add to get negative 26. What do you think? You're close. There you go. So it's got to be negative 28 and positive 2. And that does make a difference. So just be real careful. There's only one combination that you can figure out for those 2 numbers that'll work for both of those situations. Now, if you go back, the 7x minus 28, that's not the real factor because those are both divisible by 7. 7x plus 2, that's the real factor because that doesn't have anything where they have anything in common. So this would be x minus 4 as my real factor, but just divide both by 7. And then 7x plus 2. And again, I just maybe take a second and just check. Don't worry about the 3. We kept that there. I'm just looking at the parentheses. So if I do x times 7x, that's 7x squared. And then the numbers on the end, negative 4 times 2, that'll give you the negative 8. You could completely FOIL it out, but you don't have to. It's up to you.